How did American frontiersmen design and build cabins capable of withstanding the long, bitter winters of isolated wilderness, providing warmth, safety, and shelter for years at a time? In an era long before central heating, insulated walls, or modern construction materials, survival depended on ingenuity, observation, and a deep understanding of the natural environment. Every aspect of a frontier cabin, from the choice of timber and foundation placement to the orientation of doors and windows, was deliberate, serving multiple purposes: heat retention, protection from wind and snow, security against predators, and long-term durability. The frontiersman's cabin was more than a shelter. It was a carefully engineered environment that allowed life to continue in some of the harshest climates of early America. The first step in cabin construction was selecting an appropriate site. Frontiersmen sought locations that provided natural protection from prevailing winds, offered access to fresh water, and minimized flood or snow hazards. Hillsides, ridges, or areas adjacent to forests were preferred as they offered shelter, resources, and strategic vantage points. The orientation of the cabin was also critical. Entrances were typically placed facing away from prevailing winds, while windows were positioned to allow maximum sunlight during the winter months, providing passive warmth and illumination. This deliberate positioning reflected an understanding of microclimates and seasonal solar patterns, ensuring that the cabin functioned optimally throughout the year. Timber selection was another crucial consideration. Frontiersmen used locally available wood, favoring species with high density and natural resistance to rot, such as oak, chestnut, or cedar. Logs were often hand-hewn or notched using traditional tools, creating tight-fitting walls that minimized drafts. The careful stacking and interlocking of logs ensured stability and longevity, while the use of moss, clay, or other natural insulating materials between logs further reduced heat loss. The quality of construction directly influenced the cabin's ability to retain warmth, withstand storms, and provide security for both inhabitants and stored resources. Foundations were equally important. While some cabins were built directly on leveled ground, others incorporated raised stone or timber bases to protect against moisture, rot, and small predators. Elevation also helped regulate indoor temperatures by minimizing cold infiltration from the ground, while providing a dry platform for floors made of packed earth, wood planks, or a combination of both. Frontiersmen understood that even minor design details, such as a slight slope in the floor or drainage channels around the perimeter, could make the difference between a warm, dry cabin and one plagued by dampness and mold. Roofs were carefully constructed to shed snow and rain while maximizing insulation. Steeply pitched roofs allowed heavy snowfall to slide off naturally, reducing the risk of collapse. Shingles or wooden shakes were commonly used, layered to create a waterproof barrier, while roofs were sometimes insulated with turf, moss, or other natural materials to retain heat. Overhangs protected walls and entrances from rain and wind, and in some cases, eaves were extended to create semi-sheltered spaces for outdoor work or storage. The roof, in combination with thick log walls and carefully sealed joints, formed the core of the cabin's thermal envelope, crucial for survival during harsh winters. Chimneys and hearths were central to life in frontier cabins. Open hearths provided warmth, light, and a cooking surface, but required careful management to prevent smoke accumulation, indoor pollution, or fire hazards. Chimneys were often constructed from stone or clay, positioned to create an efficient draft that pulled smoke out while retaining heat within the cabin. Hearth placement was strategic, located centrally or along a main wall. It allowed heat to radiate evenly throughout the living space. Frontiersmen developed routines to manage fuel efficiently, selecting wood for its burn time, heat output, and availability, ensuring that warmth could be sustained without exhausting local resources. Windows were minimal and functional. Glass was rare and expensive, so small apertures were often covered with oiled paper, thin animal hides, or shutters to limit heat loss while allowing some light and ventilation. Their placement balanced the need for daylight with the imperative to maintain warmth. Doors were similarly insulated, sometimes reinforced with overlapping boards, thick timber, or insulating material to prevent drafts. Every opening in the cabin represented a potential source of heat loss, and skilled builders took care to minimize gaps while maintaining access and security. Inside the cabin, layout and furniture were designed with both comfort and efficiency in mind. Sleeping. Platforms were raised to reduce exposure to cold floors, while storage areas were often elevated or placed near the hearth to benefit from residual heat. Work surfaces, benches, and cooking areas were positioned to maximize usability while retaining warmth. The interior arrangement reflected a careful balance between domestic needs, survival, and preparation for seasonal tasks, such as food preservation, tool maintenance, and crafting essential items like clothing, rope, or hunting equipment. Food storage and preservation were critical for winter survival. Frontiersmen relied on root cellars, insulated cupboards, or loft spaces within the cabin to store dried, salted, or smoked foods. These areas were often positioned away from the main heat source to prevent spoilage, yet insulated enough to avoid freezing. Meat, fish, grains, and dried fruits had to last for months. And the cabin's design facilitated both access and protection. Planning for long-term sustenance influenced not only interior design, but also the layout of surrounding structures, such as smokehouses, granaries, and drying racks. Water access and management were equally important. Frontiersmen needed reliable sources for drinking, cooking, and cleaning, even in freezing conditions. Springs, streams, or wells were chosen for proximity to the cabin, but with measures to prevent contamination or freezing. Some cabins incorporated simple channels, raised troughs, or insulation around water containers to ensure year-round availability. The integration of water management with cabin placement and interior design illustrates the holistic approach frontiersmen took to survival, considering both environmental conditions and daily operational needs. Isolation shaped both the design and functionality of frontier cabins. Many settlers were miles from neighbors, relying entirely on their own resources and ingenuity. This meant that cabins had to be durable, self-sufficient, and capable of sheltering inhabitants through storms, cold snaps, or periods of illness. Storage areas were carefully organized to ensure that tools, firewood, and food were accessible without exposure to extreme cold. Multi-purpose furniture and workspaces allowed a single room to serve as kitchen, sleeping area, workshop, and social space, reflecting the necessity of efficiency in isolated settings. The frontiersman's cabin also reflected an intimate understanding of seasonal cycles. Builders incorporated lessons from previous winters to optimize heat retention, ventilation, and protection from snowdrifts. Over time, families adapted their designs to local conditions, learning which construction techniques minimized drafts, conserved fuel, and maximized comfort. These cumulative adaptations were often passed down across generations, creating a body of practical knowledge that guided settlement and construction decisions. Communal considerations, though limited, influenced cabin placement, even in isolated areas. Frontiersmen often established settlements with multiple cabins clustered near each other for safety and mutual support. Paths, shared firewood caches, and coordinated hunting or defense plans reflected an awareness of the benefits of proximity, even while maintaining sufficient distance to prevent the spread of fire or disease. The combination of isolation and limited community planning underscores the delicate balance frontiersmen had to achieve. Independence and self-reliance alongside occasional cooperation. The psychological dimension of cabin design should not be overlooked. The compact, enclosed environment of a winter cabin provided security and warmth, but also required careful organization to maintain comfort and morale during extended periods of isolation. Efficient layouts, consistent routines, and the ability to perform essential tasks indoors reduced stress and supported mental resilience. Families developed schedules for cooking, crafting, and household maintenance that created a sense of order and purpose, helping them endure long stretches of darkness and cold. Fire management was not only a practical concern but a cultural and social one. The hearth served as the center of domestic life, around which families gathered for warmth, meals, storytelling, and planning. The rhythm of tending fires dictated daily routines, from waking early to add wood to the fire to managing embers for overnight warmth. Knowledge of fuel types, combustion rates, and optimal stacking ensured efficient heat production, while careful attention prevented accidents in structures built largely of wood and other flammable materials. Cabins were often adapted over time. Frontiersmen added lean-tos, lofts, or additional outbuildings as needs grew or resources permitted. Storage lofts, for instance, kept food and tools safe from moisture, animals, and cold, while providing extra sleeping space for family members or travelers. Over time, these expansions reflected both environmental adaptation and the evolving needs of households, demonstrating the dynamic nature of frontier architecture. The combination of durable construction, strategic placement, and integrated resource management allowed cabins to serve as more than temporary shelters. They were long-term investments in survival. By integrating knowledge of timber properties, insulation techniques, hearth placement, and environmental observation, frontiersmen created spaces that supported life, work, and family continuity across years of harsh conditions. Each cabin represented a fusion of practical engineering, survival knowledge, and adaptation to the rhythms of nature. Ultimately, the American frontier cabin was a testament to human ingenuity, resilience, and the capacity to thrive in isolation. Every detail, from the pitch of the roof to the stacking of logs, from the positioning of hearths to the storage of supplies, was deliberate, reflecting centuries of accumulated, practical knowledge. These cabins enabled families to endure long winters, preserve resources, protect livestock, and maintain a semblance of normalcy despite the challenges of isolation. They were living systems carefully designed to balance heat, security, and utility in environments where failure could be fatal. Life inside an American frontier cabin during winter was structured around survival, labor, and resource management. The harsh isolation demanded routines that balanced warmth, sustenance, and the maintenance of shelter. The interior of the cabin, though simple, was carefully organized to support multiple functions. Sleeping areas were elevated to reduce exposure to cold floors and drafts, while storage spaces for food, tools, and clothing were positioned to remain accessible yet protected from moisture, pests, and freezing temperatures. Every inch of the cabin was utilized efficiently, with furniture, work surfaces, and bedding serving multiple purposes, reflecting both ingenuity and necessity. Food preparation and preservation occupied a central role in daily life. Frontier families relied on a combination of stored provisions and seasonal hunting or trapping. Meats, grains, dried fruits, and salted fish were carefully rationed, while root vegetables were stored in cellars or insulated spaces to prevent freezing. The hearth was the hub of cooking activity, providing heat for meals, drying herbs and food, and occasionally smoking meats. Cooking techniques were adapted to conserve fuel. Frontiersmen selected slow-burning wood for prolonged heat, layered fires for maximum efficiency, and carefully managed embers to maintain warmth throughout the night. Every meal was both a necessity and a lesson in resource planning, as mismanagement of food or fuel could have life-threatening consequences. Animal care was another crucial component of winter survival. Livestock, such as cows, goats, pigs, and chickens, were often kept in attached sheds or nearby enclosures to provide warmth, food, and resources like milk, eggs, and hides. These structures were integrated into the cabin layout to facilitate ease of access and reduce exposure to severe weather. Bedding was replenished regularly to maintain hygiene and warmth, and animals were fed on stored fodder such as hay or preserved grains. Older children participated in daily chores, learning essential skills for managing livestock, while adults ensured that animals remained healthy and productive. The integration of animal care with domestic routines exemplified the frontier philosophy of self-sufficiency. Maintaining warmth was a continuous task. The hearth, central to life in the cabin, required careful attention. Fires were tended multiple times a day, with wood added in measured amounts to maintain consistent heat. Smoke management was critical. Too little ventilation could lead to respiratory issues or accidental fires, while too much draft would sap warmth. Frontiersmen mastered the art of stacking logs, managing airflow, and selecting the right wood to achieve an optimal balance between heat and smoke control. The chimney and flue design, often constructed from stone or clay, maximized heat retention while directing smoke safely outside. Even minor inefficiencies in fire management could compromise comfort and health, highlighting the skill and vigilance required to sustain life through winter. Cabin inhabitants also had to contend with isolation and the psychological strain it imposed. Extended periods indoors demanded activities that engaged both mind and body. Crafting, woodworking, weaving, and tool repair were common, serving practical needs while providing productive distraction. Storytelling, music, and family rituals strengthened social bonds and passed cultural knowledge between generations. Children learned essential skills while participating in these activities, ensuring that survival knowledge was maintained and adapted for the next generation. This blend of work, learning, and recreation helped maintain morale and mental resilience in an otherwise challenging environment. Water management remained a priority even as the cold deepened. Streams, springs, or wells were protected from freezing, and snow was often collected and melted for drinking, cooking, and cleaning. Simple insulation methods such as covering containers with straw or placing them near the hearth ensured a reliable water supply. This careful attention to water availability not only supported daily living, but also reduced the risk of illness, which could be catastrophic in isolated conditions. Efficient water management reflected a comprehensive understanding of the interplay between natural resources and human needs. Cabin interiors were often multifunctional. Cooking, sleeping, storage, and crafting occurred within the same space, with careful spatial organization ensuring efficiency and comfort. Sleeping platforms were sometimes constructed above storage areas or benches, using height to conserve heat and maximize usable floor space. Workbenches doubled as dining tables or preparation areas, while loft spaces provided additional storage or temporary sleeping quarters. The arrangement of the interior was informed by practical experience with every element, designed to reduce heat loss, conserve labor, and facilitate daily routines. Maintenance of the cabin itself was ongoing. Snow and ice were removed from roofs to prevent collapse, gaps between logs were sealed with moss, clay, or mud, and floors were replenished with straw or other insulating materials. Tools required constant upkeep to remain functional in the harsh environment, from sharpening knives and axes to repairing wooden implements. Even small improvements to the cabin's structure could have a significant impact on comfort and survival, demonstrating the dynamic, adaptive approach frontiersmen employed to meet the challenges of winter. Storage was critical for sustaining life through months of isolation. Provisions were carefully organized to prevent spoilage, while tools, clothing, and fuel were kept accessible without compromising warmth. Raised platforms and lofts protected goods from dampness, pests, and freezing temperatures, while strategic placement near the hearth allowed indirect warmth to prevent spoilage. These storage practices reflected both practicality and foresight, ensuring that every item had a purpose, and that the household could function efficiently even in the absence of external support. The social and labor organization within frontier families was highly structured. Tasks were divided according to ability, with adults overseeing essential functions and children assisting where appropriate. The winter period was a time for coordinated effort, where survival depended on the consistent performance of multiple interrelated duties. Cooperation was not only practical, but cultural, reinforcing family bonds, transmitting knowledge, and maintaining a sense of purpose during long periods of confinement. Seasonal routines, learned through observation and experience, guided work, play, and rest, ensuring that life continued smoothly despite the external hardships. Lighting within the cabin was simple but effective. Candles, tallow, lamps, and hearth flames provided illumination for work and social activity while minimizing heat loss. The careful placement of light sources allowed households to perform essential tasks efficiently, from mending clothing and crafting tools to reading, writing, or engaging in cultural activities. Even minimal lighting required careful management of fuel, underscoring the interconnected nature of warmth, labor, and daily life. Frontiersmen also had to be prepared for emergencies. Storms, illness, or accidents could isolate a family for days or weeks. Cabins were stocked not only with food and fuel, but with tools for repair, first aid supplies, and spare clothing. Knowledge of nearby resources, hunting grounds, and escape routes was critical, as was the ability to adapt quickly to changing conditions. These preparations were embedded into daily routines and reinforced through practice, ensuring that households were resilient and capable of weathering unexpected challenges. Crafting and production remained intertwined with survival. Clothing and blankets were often made from animal hides or woven fibers, providing insulation against the cold. Tools and equipment were repaired or fashioned from locally available materials, while wooden implements were carved, sanded, and maintained to withstand the rigors of winter labor. These activities served both practical and educational purposes, training younger members in essential skills while contributing to the household's ability to endure the season. Health and hygiene were constant concerns. Limited access to fresh food and clean water, combined with cold and confinement, created the risk of illness. Cabins were ventilated carefully to balance warmth with fresh air, while personal hygiene and sanitation were maintained using available resources. Awareness of disease prevention and self-care was passed down through observation, instruction, and experience, forming a critical component of survival knowledge within frontier communities. Work extended to the management of fuel and materials. Wood and other combustibles were carefully rationed, split, and stacked to ensure consistent availability. Families planned fuel usage for cooking, heating, and crafting, taking into account the time required to gather and process resources. This meticulous approach ensured that households remained warm and functional throughout the winter, avoiding the dire consequences of depleted supplies. Even social interaction was shaped by the cabin's design and isolation. Families relied on each other for emotional support, shared labor, and cultural continuity. Storytelling, music, and games became integral to the household routine, reinforcing bonds, passing down knowledge, and sustaining morale. These practices transformed the cabin from a mere shelter into a living space where survival, education, and culture coexisted. By midwinter, a well-constructed cabin had proven its worth. Families could maintain warmth, prepare and preserve food, tend livestock, perform essential labor, and sustain social and psychological well-being. The integration of construction knowledge, environmental awareness, and routine management ensured that isolated households could endure extended periods of hardship without external support. Every aspect of daily life was interconnected, demonstrating the careful planning, skill, and foresight that defined frontier survival. The frontier cabin thus represented a dynamic system of survival. Its design, materials, and organization allowed families to withstand the cold, maintain efficiency, and preserve life across months of isolation. Interior arrangements, resource management, and daily routines were interdependent, each contributing to warmth, sustenance, and security. This careful orchestration of human activity within a built environment reflects the ingenuity and adaptability of American frontiersmen, whose cabins were as much instruments of survival as they were homes. As winter gradually receded and the first signs of spring appeared, frontier families began to transition their daily routines from survival-focused winter activities to seasonal preparation for the warmer months ahead. The long, cold months had tested the durability of their cabins, the efficiency of their resource management, and the resilience of family members. Every activity in the spring was informed by lessons learned during winter, from maintaining warmth and fuel supplies to managing food stores, tending animals, and preparing the surrounding land for planting and hunting. The frontier cabin, more than a temporary shelter, had become a hub of adaptation, survival, and preparation for future seasons. The thawing of snow and ice allowed families to venture farther from their cabins, retrieving supplies stored outdoors, repairing fences, and preparing pathways for increased mobility. Roofs, walls, and foundations were inspected for damage caused by snow load, water seepage, or frost heaving. Chimneys and hearths were cleaned and repaired to ensure efficiency for the coming months, while doors and windows were checked for gaps or rot. The winter months had revealed the strengths and vulnerabilities of construction techniques, and spring maintenance provided an opportunity to reinforce the cabin's structural integrity. This work was essential for both safety and long-term survival, as the cabin needed to withstand subsequent winters and variable weather conditions. Food management shifted in response to new resources. Stored provisions from winter continued to be consumed, but fresh hunting, trapping, and foraging provided additional nutrition. Early spring offered opportunities to gather wild greens, early roots, and fish from thawing streams. Families coordinated their foraging expeditions to ensure both efficiency and safety, often pairing adults with older children who could learn techniques for tracking, identifying edible plants, and handling game. Preservation practices refined during winter, such as smoking, salting, and drying, were adapted to incorporate new supplies, creating a seamless transition from winter stores to spring resources. Livestock care took on renewed importance. Animals that had been confined during the coldest months were gradually returned to pasture or freer enclosures, allowing exercise, grazing, and improved health. Feeding routines adapted to the changing availability of natural forage, and families continued to provide supplemental feed from stored hay or grain. Monitoring animal health remained critical, as exposure to mud, thawing conditions, and insects could introduce illness or injury. The integration of livestock management with seasonal planning ensured that animals continued to provide essential resources, milk, eggs, wool, and hides, while supporting the household economy and survival strategy. The interior of the cabin also evolved with the seasons. Sleeping areas and lofts that had been necessary for insulation during winter were now rearranged for ventilation and comfort. Workspaces used for winter crafts transitioned to spring preparations, including tool maintenance, boat repair, and the production of implements for planting or hunting. Families continued to balance indoor and outdoor labor, using the cabin as a base of operations while expanding their activities to encompass the surrounding environment. This adaptability reflected a sophisticated understanding of the interplay between shelter, labor, and seasonal change. Water management shifted as streams thawed and wells became more accessible. Frontiersmen continued to monitor water quality and availability, ensuring that supply remained clean and safe for consumption. Irrigation channels, simple troughs, and collection containers were adjusted to accommodate the higher flow of thawing rivers and streams. These systems, refined during the winter months, allowed families to maintain a steady water supply, supporting both domestic tasks and animal care while reducing the risk of illness. The spring season also marked the start of construction and expansion projects. Additional outbuildings, lean-tos, storage sheds, and smokehouses were built or repaired to accommodate the increased demands of planting, harvesting, and processing food. Loft expansions within the cabin provided extra storage or sleeping space as families prepared for the arrival of visitors, seasonal laborers, or new household members. These modifications reflected both practical necessity and adaptive innovation, ensuring that the cabin remained a durable, multifunctional hub of domestic and economic activity. Craftwork and tool maintenance were essential to preparing for the coming months. Axes, knives, saws, and farming implements were sharpened, repaired, or replaced, while wooden tools and containers were oiled, reinforced, or reconstructed as needed. Families coordinated their efforts to balance immediate household needs with longer-term goals, including preparation for planting, trapping, or trade. Crafting extended beyond practicality. It provided an opportunity for instruction, as older family members taught essential skills to younger generations, ensuring that survival knowledge and technical expertise were preserved. Social and cultural practices continued to be woven into daily life. Storytelling, songs, and rituals maintained a sense of continuity and identity, bridging the isolation of winter with the expanding activities of spring. Shared labor reinforced cooperation and strengthened family bonds, while opportunities for external interaction, visits from neighbors or traders, reintroduced social networks that had been limited by snowbound conditions. These practices provided emotional support, reinforced cultural knowledge, and facilitated the transmission of skills critical to both survival and long-term prosperity. Fuel management remained a priority, even as outdoor temperatures rose. Wood and other combustibles that had been stored for winter use were carefully inventoried and replenished. Families planned fuel use for cooking, heating during early spring chills, and craftwork that required fire, such as blacksmithing, pottery, or tool production. Maintaining a steady supply of fuel ensured that households remained functional and comfortable, even during unexpected cold snaps or rainy periods, highlighting the continuous nature of resource management on the frontier. Sanitation and hygiene practices were expanded with the arrival of warmer weather. Waste management, cleaning of animal pens, and general household maintenance were carried out more extensively, reducing the risk of disease and improving living conditions. The availability of additional water facilitated more thorough cleaning of tools, clothing, and living spaces. Attention to hygiene, learned and practiced during the confined winter months, remained critical for health and comfort, especially as households increased their activity and interaction with the surrounding environment. Spring also presented opportunities for trade and exchange. Surplus goods produced during winter, smoked meats, preserved fruits, hides, and crafted items could be exchanged with neighbors, traveling merchants, or nearby settlements. This exchange allowed families to acquire new tools, seeds, or other essentials, supplementing what they had produced themselves. Trade reinforced the economic resilience of frontier households, expanding their access to resources and providing motivation to maintain efficient production, preservation, and storage practices developed during the winter. The cumulative knowledge gained during winter informed all aspects of spring activity. Families applied lessons in insulation, fire management, resource conservation, and labor coordination to new tasks, ensuring continuity and efficiency. The cabin, a product of winter planning and construction, became a versatile base from which households could expand their activities. Its durable design allowed for adaptation to changing needs, supporting both survival and productivity while fostering independence and resilience. Preparation for planting, hunting, and additional food storage became a central focus. Lofts and outbuildings were organized to store seeds, tools, and harvested materials, while fields, gardens, and surrounding terrain were readied for cultivation. Skills honed during winter, such as precision in cutting, construction, and storage organization, were now applied to the broader landscape. Families worked in concert, balancing immediate domestic duties with long-term planning, ensuring that both the household and the cabin could support life through the next cycle of seasons. Psychological resilience, cultivated during the isolation of winter, continued to influence behavior and routines. Confidence in the cabin's durability, the reliability of stored resources, and the family's coordinated skills allowed for increased engagement with the environment, social interaction, and risk-taking necessary for planting, hunting, and expansion. The cabin itself served as a psychological anchor, providing a secure, familiar base from which families could explore, work, and interact with the broader frontier. By the end of the spring transition, the cabin had proven its multifunctional value. It had sheltered families through months of extreme cold, supported the management of food, water, and livestock, and provided a base for crafting, socialization, and cultural continuity. As the environment shifted towards summer, the knowledge, routines, and infrastructure developed during winter and refined during spring ensured that households could thrive in the face of ongoing challenges. Every aspect of the cabin, from hearth placement to loft storage, from insulation to pathway planning, demonstrated the practical intelligence and adaptability of American frontiersmen. The legacy of these winter cabins extends beyond their immediate function. They represent a synthesis of environmental understanding, architectural skill, and cultural adaptation. The design principles, heat retention, insulation, resource efficiency, multifunctionality, and adaptability reflected centuries of observation and trial-and-error survival experience. Frontiersmen were not merely building shelters, they were constructing sustainable systems that balanced human needs, natural forces, and seasonal cycles, ensuring continuity of life and knowledge across generations. Ultimately, the frontier cabin was a testament to ingenuity and resilience. It was a living system, carefully engineered to integrate warmth, labor, food security, and social cohesion. Families who lived within these structures were able to endure extended isolation, harsh winters, and environmental challenges, emerging each spring with skills, resources, and confidence. To prepare for the year ahead, these cabins were far more than temporary shelters. They were enduring symbols of survival, adaptation, and the human capacity to harmonize with a demanding natural world.